Coming up on Up at Noon, we're back, and we really want to talk about Spider-Man villains. Plus, we're joined by Jordan Vogt Roberts, director of the Metal Gear movie and Kong Skull Island, and he wants to talk about GameCube controllers? All that and more right now on Up at Noon, not live. Sorry.
Hello and welcome back to IGN's Up at Noon, the triumphant return, although very briefly.
We're normally live.
Yeah, we're normally live. I'm Brian Altano. This is Max Scoville. You know us from Up at Noon and IGN. We've been doing the show for a long time. We're going to keep doing the show for a long time. We took a 5-week break because I had a babby. And then coming up after this, we have Comic-Con and Max is getting married.
Yes, we're having a busy summer.
We're having a thing.
Normally this show is live, but this week we're not live for reasons I don't remember. As you mentioned, Brian had a baby. I'm getting married. Next week is Comic-Con. I'll be down there hosting a bunch of stuff on IGN's big old live show, which is going the entire weekend. And then what's happening? We're going to a goat farm this weekend for my bachelor party.
Yep.
That's a thing.
And then you're going to get married.
Unfortunately, commenters, Up at Noon is not canceled. We've just been incredibly busy. So
and guess what, losers? We both figured out how to meet girls and get married and have kids and stuff. So now what? Now you can just call us dorks and ugly.
Yeah, anyway, we should be back to normal in August. We have a fun show lined up for you. While Brian was off rearing children or whatever you do with a newborn baby, I've been receiving piles and piles of packages of fun toys to play with. We're going to play with some of them on the show. And then later on, I got to hang out with Jordan Vogt Roberts, who's the guy who's directing the Metal Gear movie. You might know him from Kong Skull Island. Super cool dude. He's actually going to be coming by our Comic-Con show as well, I believe. But that's coming up later in the show. In the meantime, let's talk about some cool news that is happening.
We still don't have like a thing for cool news that is happening.
Someday. We've been doing the show for what, 3 years now?
Like 7.
Coming up on, this version of the show. Anyway, Neil Blomkamp, who we've had on the show, he's director of Chappie and Elysium and District 9 and all sorts of other...
Led with Chappie, huh?
I like Chappie.
Okay.
Anyway, Chappie is relevant here because he's directing a RoboCop movie, which is perfect.
It is perfect.
Everyone, I feel like people that give this guy like not enough credit. He makes incredibly visually awesome movies. They're really cool. He's got great sense of special effects and style. And people are just like, Chappie was stupid. Anyway, let's go watch John Wick Chapter 2. And I'm like, really?
Yeah.
You don't want to watch the movie where the like railguns explode people and Hugh Jackman has a mustache? There's mech fights and stuff.
It's one of the best video game movies ever made.
It's super fun.
If you've been tracking what Neil's been doing, when he was on the show here, he talks about Oat Studios, where he's basically fast-tracking a bunch of short, independently funded films that are sci-fi as hell and incredibly cool. What he's doing now is the sequel to the original RoboCop, where it's basically rebooting the angle that those movies went in.
So basically, it's the same thing he wanted to do with Aliens, but he's doing it with RoboCop. It's called RoboCop Returns.
Yep.
I'm so excited for this. I think he's possibly the perfect director working right now to do this.
It's worth mentioning this has, or at least we understand, has nothing to do with the RoboCop reboot we got a couple years ago.
I hope not.
We hope not. This is a sequel to the original RoboCop.
Yeah,
the good one.
I like that this is a thing we're getting now, which is sequels to the good one. Like in the same way that like the new Halloween is a sequel to the original Halloween, and it dismisses all of the other sequels that maybe didn't really know what made the first one work, and it still might not work. We don't know for sure, but. Moving on, obviously Star Wars is still a thing that is happening and coming out forever, and sometime, in Christmas 2019, we're getting Episode 9.
Yeah, we are a year and a half away from a brand new Star Wars movie, and 2 months away from the last Star Wars movie.
Yeah. But we got announcements that Billy D. Williams will be reprising the role of Lando Calrissian, which I'm super fine with. I was kind of hoping he'd be a surprise in episode 8, but
a little higher.
And then also Kerry Russell is going to be showing up in there.
Yes, which quick PSA: if you don't watch The Americans, please do. That show just wrapped up, and it is far and away some of the best performance I've ever seen on TV. Kerry Russell is the lead on that show, and she is phenomenal. She also does a really great job of playing somebody that you don't really trust as a positive, optimistic, wonderful protagonist. So it leads me to believe that straight off of that casting right into episode 9, I don't think she's just going to play like a Holdo. I think she's going to be somebody that's a little more nefarious. Possibly a villain. Possibly Rey's mom, we're hearing, which is weird because I think I'm one of the people that actually really likes the way episode 8 buttons stuff up with that. Because I feel like a lot of Rian Johnson's writing in that movie was, and we don't have to rip this can of worms open again, but it was basically giving characters a scenario of like, what's the worst thing that can happen to them? And if you think your parents are important, the worst thing that can happen to you is finding out that they're not. But episode 9 is going to do a lot of cleanup, I believe, for a lot of people who didn't like 8. So either way, it could work.
I'm willing to take any kind of Star Wars casting with a grain of salt because we've seen this. With all the most recent movies where they were like, "Hey, guess what? In The Force Awakens, those guys from the Raid are going to be in there," and then they showed up and they were like, "Tell that to Kanji Club," and then they got eaten by Rathtars or whatever, and that was it. They didn't do anything. They just didn't. They just hung out and they wore boots and then they got eaten, and that was like there was no fighting. They didn't do any of the stuff you wanted them to do. And so anyway, and then of course there's Luke Skywalker, which is an entirely different can of worms. Anyway, moving on. Yes, Joaquin Phoenix is apparently joining the long list of actors who've played the Joker, and this is not going to be in a Batman movie. This is going to be in a Joker origin movie, which I don't care about. I don't want that. I'm sorry. I think that some people maybe want that, but I thought the whole message that we're supposed to take away from Batman and the Joker and the Dark Knight and the Killing Joke is that it's all about balance, and that character without sort of a Batman to play off of is so much more. I don't know. It's just like
no. I'm totally with you. Also, like Batman has established Joker origin stories like 6 times on film.
I mean, and then the best one also didn't have an origin story. The whole point of Heath Ledger's whole thing was like he's just sort of this rogue element. He's an agent of chaos.
Yeah.
He keeps telling different origin stories. Like that was cool.
But
I don't know.
Max, why would you possibly look to what the best Batman movie of the last 20 years has done so well when you can ignore all that and just go in a totally different direction? If you look at Suicide Squad had a Joker origin vignette, whatever that was, whatever you want to call that, a montage, tucked in there. We saw that entire acid dipping scene effectively, right?
Yeah.
Or at least along the lines of through Harley Quinn's perspective. We also saw it in...
Jared Leto's off playing Morbius in the Spider-Man spinoff.
What's going on?
Did you hear about that one?
What's going on?
Oh, God.
Bring it in.
We stopped doing this show for 5 weeks and they announced stuff? How dare they?
How dare they? Morbius!
All right, so, yeah.
So you're not excited for this at all?
I mean, it's a casting announcement. This is where we are. It's like we don't have we're gonna have some really cool stuff in just a week at Comic-Con. There's gonna be all kinds of trailers. We're gonna get excited about stuff. There's gonna be new announcements. They announced a live-action Gundam movie by showing like a sort of half-ass logo and then a bunch of sleepy old guys sitting at an Anime Expo panel. I hate when they announce things. They're like, "Great news, everybody! This thing is maybe happening.
Yeah.
We're talking about it.
Well,
we're in talks."
Here's the thing, and you're probably like, you guys are hypocrites because you just talked about casting news 10 seconds ago with Star Wars. Star Wars has a release window. That's a movie that's got to get made. It's got a director. I know that doesn't mean much in Star Wars anymore, but it's got a director right now.
I don't know. The last thing I watched Billy D. Williams in was like a Colt 45 commercial. Like I want to see him in some. I watched the special editions on Sci-Fi Channel in like 1997, and he was like, "And welcome back to the Sci-Fi Channel. We're gonna take a quick break, but when we come back, behind the scenes making," and I was just like, I don't know, like I haven't seen him in movies. He hasn't been anything.
But
you know?
like I don't care about the Joker right now because we don't know where the Batman is. Remember that movie? Remember The Batman, starring Ben Affleck? Remember that? We've been talking about it for 2 years.
I want to see Batman movies.
Just make a Batman movie.
I want to see more Batman movies.
I don't want to see Beavis, the BVS or whatever, and I don't want to see him show up in the car in Suicide Squad, which I saw that car in real life. That's a cool car. That's a bad movie. That's a cool car.
I think that's what is it? It's like Skrillex and Rick Ross, like purple Lamborghini.
The car, yeah, both of their souls.
There's like a whole
were
music
infused
video where
directly
it's like
into it.
Skrillex is hanging out with the Joker.
Yep.
But Jared Leto's not the Joker anymore. He's Morbius, Spider-Man's vampire friend.
What's going on?
What's going on? I can't. That sounds like that headline was written by an app or something.
I know you have a lot of questions between now and then. All will be resolved this fall when Aquaman swims into theaters to save the DC cinematic universe. Everything's fine. Speaking of movies that were kind of a wreck, I saw Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom during my paternity leave. Here's the thing I learned. Seeing a movie when you have a baby, basically impossible. So I got to sneak out for a little bit, and my mother-in-law watched our baby, and we went to go see the new dinosaur film, because I enjoy seeing the dinosaurs tear up those men. That's always a good time. Every few years you get to see a couple of dinosaurs really tear into those men, and then you just hope that's the best of it. It was a wreck. And not really in a fun way, just in a real stupid, dumb way. And so I feel stupider from watching it, but on the plus side, the people responsible for Jurassic Park, the franchise, remember that the franchise used to be really good. And we know that LEGO are always awesome. And so Jurassic Park is the best place to return to.
Yeah.
When the kingdom has fallen, you return home.
This
to the
is,
park.
I think, the coolest Lego set that I've seen in a long time. This is a 25th anniversary. I think we actually talked about it in the show. This is a Jurassic Park Velociraptor chase set. This is $40. Walmart sent this over to us. I think it's available in other stores too. I know it's online. And it's based, of course, on the original Jurassic Park. The really, really good one that, like, Jurassic World, it's fine, whatever.
one.
It's got some other dinosaur stuff in it. And this is just like, this feels like a Lego set that should have come out in an alternate reality a long time ago, but we're just getting it now. Check this out. This has so much like weird, like geeky stuff in it for people who remember the original film very well, like most people should. It's got the four kind of main characters. It's got Alan Grant, Ellie Sattler, and Lex and Tim over here, the little kids, and then of course the Raptor, which is like a super fun little fig. This reminds me of the original like Lego Dragon figures.
And so, like, to clarify here, this effectively kit bashes 3 major scenes from the film. One is the Mr. DNA section where you see the dinosaur eggs and the raptor hatch.
Well, it's just,
one is the kitchen, where you get to see the kids hide, and then also is like the main control room where
the most exciting scene where they try to lock a door.
Where Dennis Nedry's computer is
supposed to be like this, and then the Velociraptor comes and sticks his head through it. And he's like, hello!
Hi!
And if you look really closely, I don't know if you can see it on our camera here, but there's like a little tiny picture of the Dennis Nedry doing the and they got, they all hang out. You can take his hat off. He's got hair and stuff. My favorite part here, though, and this is such a weird deep cut. They made tiny Jello.
Oh, that's
little tiny Jello. When the kids are hanging out, they're eating the Jello, and the girl's holding the Jello. There's even a little spoon. You can take the spoon out, and you can put like a piece of Jello in it. And you can put it in her hand and have her holding the Jello, like.
And it
oh
shakes.
no, it's shaking. Yeah,
and you can make the raptor hold the spoon with the Jello in his hand.
And then I love this. Like the only real like action feature here is the door locking. But then you can also like pop that out.
Oh
like,
yeah, and have the raptor come through.
Hi, hello, it's me, the Raptor. Are you guys doing anything in here? We're all hanging out. And then I love
Alan.
This is Unix. I know this. This is a little kid. I like these weird little funny legs they gave to children Lego set minifigs now. But anyway, there's one little other piece here that I absolutely adore, which is a tiny Lego Barbasol canister, which you can't even. I promise I'm holding it. It's very small.
I actually like that.
There it is.
It's so tiny.
It's so you can go over to the secret DNA storage area over here, and you take all those embryos out and put them in there. Now the set they need to make is Wayne Knight and his stolen Jeep and his members-only jacket and his Hawaiian shirt and the Dilophosaurus spitting in his face.
Where's Dennis? Where's Dennis Nedry?
I was actually at, I think it was Target the other day, and they had a bunch of brand new original Jurassic Park action figures. And they made one of Alan Grant, they made one of Ellie Sattler, and they had that guy, he's like, Robert Muldoon, who's like the Velociraptor expert.
Which he was way over romanticized in the toy lore for those films.
Because
he did not live long.
He's the guy who's like, I know how to kill a raptor, and then he just
goes
gets
clever girl and dies.
Yeah.
Spoilers.
They also make one of Ian Malcolm, who's it's Jeff Goldblum, and he's got his road flare. And I just want more Dennis Nedry toys. Like he's such a funny character. He's just like this like fat idiot who just eats a bunch of pie. He eats shaving cream or something. There's that whole thing where, did you see that? You remember that scene where he puts the shaving cream on the pie? You remember that? And when he first gives him the Barbasol thing, and he's like, "We got dots in here," and then he puts it on the pie. I knew so many kids who thought you could eat shaving cream because of that scene, because he puts it on the pie.
I always thought that they just put whipped cream in the can because it's
Why would they put?
Because it's not a real can anyway. It's fake.
But why would they put whipped cream when it's a Barbasol can? I feel like that's a pretty big giveaway that it's full of dinosaur embryos.
Because if you go through TSA and they spray the cream, they're not going to taste it.
They didn't have TSA. That movie came out in 1993.
If you go in through 1993 TSA and they spray the cream, they're not going to taste it.
Hey, what's pretty cool though is you can actually just have the raptor holding like a frying pan and a spoon. And
That's right. He's watching Jurassic Park.
He just eats it.
And he
I
has
like
a
that.
cereal.
Anyway, big thanks to Walmart for sending this over. I love that we're getting like weird classic Jurassic Park toys. I hope we get more of these because I don't know if they're gonna make Lego sets based on like Ghostbusters and Back to the Future and other dorky old things from the olden days. Give us more. Give us the bus from Speed. Give us a Lego set of that.
That's a good one. It could crash into that airplane at the end. That made no sense, but that's good.
It's a good movie.
And then there's that train sequence with Dennis Hopper. It's not even about the bus anymore. They're just on the train. You know why? Trains go fast
too. If that movie was just about a bus, it would be called Bus, but it's not. It's called Speed. It's about all sorts of vehicles.
It's about the concept of speed and how multiple vehicles interact with it, not including that plane, which was parked.
Anyway, speaking of action movies, we had Jordan Vogt Roberts come by to hang out and talk about action movies. He's going to talk about that later, but in the meantime, he's like a long-time old-school reader of IGN, and he really wanted to talk about a GameCube controller made of clay. So here's this. It's an 18-year-old IGN conspiracy debunked by the director of the Metal Gear Solid movie. What is this job?
Journalism.
Hey everybody, Max here for IGN. I'm with Jordan Vogt Roberts. You may know him as the guy who's probably directing the Metal Gear movie. He's a big fan of games and a longtime reader of IGN, and he's here to tell us about a piece of IGN history. Jordan,
IGN history lesson.
take it away and don't break it.
I know, it's very sensitive. All right, so I was reading IGN when it was IGN 64. It's one of the first websites I discovered. It peaked in the GameCube era for me in terms of like how frequently I read it, which was constant.
It's gone downhill since then.
Well, I have like a life now. It's hard for me to,
I started hiring guys in Hawaiian shirts, and it's just
I know.
crap since then.
I'll get back on it. Anyway, I recently accosted Fran drunkenly during E3 to ask him about this because when the GameCube was coming out, he wrote an article where he created a GameCube controller out of clay. And he described the way it felt in your hands, he described the way the buttons felt, and he was very confident in the ergonomics of it and like very, very descriptive in the way that it felt. So this is that controller. And the reason I accosted him when I was drunk, and he was drunk, and I was like, tell me about this thing. I've had a long-standing theory that, I don't know, a decade ago, however long ago, he got his hands on a GameCube controller well before he was supposed to, or anyone was supposed to. And in order to write about it, he created a clay version. Spit, because I'm so excited. He created a clay version of a GameCube controller, acting as though he had never touched one before, and described the way that it felt when secretly a developer had let him hold one and play with one. Because if you read the article, he talks about the way the buttons feel, and you can't really press clay buttons down. But I was like, Fran, you touched the controller, right? And he was like, oh yeah, totally. So it was like a long-standing conspiracy theory that I recently had confirmed. And I feel like a very important mystery in my life was like closed.
I'm glad you got to the bottom of it.
Yeah.
So 18 years ago, Fran lied about whether or not he'd actually touched one of these. This actually feels just like a GameCube controller. You could probably mod this.
Don't break it.
It's really,
this
it's
is what I'm
heavy
gonna
as
play
hell, too.
Smash Ultimate on, actually.
I think so, yeah. We should see if we can get this hooked up to a
Also,
Switch.
why doesn't Nintendo just call all their controllers Wavebirds now? I feel like it has such a generic name. I wish all the Switch Pro controllers were just called Wavebirds.
That would be nice.
And
I think they
also,
should just- yeah.
if the GameCube controller that they release isn't wireless, I'm gonna freak out.
Oh, I got-
Nintendo.
I don't know. This is, well, I hope it's a little bit lighter than this. This is kind of a lot
That's
to
a heavy
lug
one.
around.
That's a heavy one. Anyway, I'm here for IGN Facts and History. Reporting live.
Do you want to talk about the Double Dash review?
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, there's nothing to really talk about other than the fact that I think the 7.9 was well-deserved. I think it was the slowest entry in the franchise. I think it took several entities to get the speed back up to now where like they have like 200cc, 250 now, right? Like it's infinite. Anyway, Double Dash, weakest of the franchise, 7.9, absolutely deserved. I think people should bring back the insult of saying something got 7.9.
Well, controversial words from Jordan Vogt Roberts, but important pieces of IGN history.
Bring back 7.9. Also, I have a theory. Do you remember the megaton of it all? See, I'm teaching people about IGN here. All right. The term megaton, as like an announcement, happened because there was like a weird theory that they were gonna drop a bunch of GameCube-related news. And everyone was like, oh, it's a megaton announcement. It's a megaton announcement. And I swear to God, on the IGN GameCube boards, it was, oh, there's a megaton coming. And it was like Matt and everyone like gassing people up, and then it never happened. But the whole terminology of megaton, I swear to God, the idea of that coming from an announcement comes from the GameCube era IGN.
I can believe it. Well, For all IGN news, keep it locked at IGN64.net or whatever. The Imagine Games Network.
And we're back, and you know who else is coming back this year? That's right, Spider-Man. In video game form, and also he was in Infinity War.
Yep. And his worst enemy Venom will be coming back, but in a different universe. And he's not in that movie.
Yes.
But then we're getting Spider-Man: Homecoming down the road. That's what next
Far
year.
Home.
Far from home. Far from this movie going season. We've been getting rumors that Jake Gyllenhaal is going to be playing Mysterio. And there's the Venom movie. I just want to talk about Spider-Man villains, if that's okay. Can we just get in there? Can we talk about some Spider-Man villains?
We good with that? We cool with that? We talk about Spider-Man?
I've been thinking about this.
Let's talk about Spider-Man.
I think Spider-Man has the best villains. I think Spider-Man of all of the superheroes. I mean, some people are gonna be like Batman has better villains. Batman's villains are like, I think they have a similar balance to Spider-Man's, where you've got some that are like really out there and some that are like really kind of grounded and dark.
Right.
But I feel like Spider-Man's are more interesting.
For the most part, I agree.
They're like definitely more, like they're more consistently wacky.
Yep.
But yeah, Mysterio, I love him, and I'm really excited to see him in a movie, because I think that the key thing with Spider-Man villains is they go one of two directions. Either they are something you're like, oh, that's actually frightening, and that's like a scary thing, and I could see that being like a real good bad guy. Or they're completely nonsensical, and you're like, you have to work extra hard to make this a compelling villain character.
Yeah, especially working extra hard to fold that into like modern MCU stuff, which still always feels a little bit grounded.
Right.
Like if you look at what they did with the Vulture in the last movie, in Homecoming, it was really smart because they didn't just make him like a psychotic Birdman. They just gave him like a cool flight jacket and some wings and stuff like that.
Yeah,
it felt sort of feasible.
Definitely made sense there, and they started setting up Matt Gargan, who's the Scorpion. He showed up at the end there. He's that dude from Breaking Bad. But like Mysterio, his whole deal, and if they're getting Jake Gyllenhaal to play him, also thanks to Hasbro for sending over these Marvel Legends toys, which I don't know, we're like, how are we gonna talk about toys? Let's just play with them and talk about Spider-Man villains. Mysterio's whole deal is he's a special effects whiz, and he uses his magical special effects skills to do fake crimes, to do fake supervillainy. Like, he doesn't actually really have any powers. It's all just baloney.
Right.
And then of course he was introduced at a time when like practical effects were the only kind of effects. And now it's like, is this dude gonna be like in a green screen? Like, is he gonna be just doing CG everywhere? But
he could be doing holograms.
That'll be, I don't know how that's gonna work. I don't know what that's gonna look like, or how you make that like interesting, how you make that a compelling like scenario. But I'm interested to see how they approach it and how they deal with it. This is from like the newest wave of Spider-Man figures, and if you collect all of them, you can build the Lizard, who's awesome. We got him in that first Mark Webb Amazing Spider-Man movie, and I thought that they really screwed up. I always loved how Sam Raimi was teasing Kirk Connors, like he was Peter's teacher, and he's got the one arm, and you're like, oh, I know who that is. He's got one arm. It was that actor from he was in that awful movie Happiness. And he's like a good actor. He could have totally shown up as the Lizard.
He's one of those actors that like pops up in a lot of stuff, and he's one of those like that guy actors.
Yeah.
But yeah, this Build-A-Figure is awesome. Max and I have been geeking out about this all day.
This is such a cool toy. Again, you've got to buy like 6 other $20 action figures to get it.
Like a foot, an arm, and a tail, and a head.
But this is a good ass Spider-Man figure.
He's got an articulated mouth. He can bite down on that tongue.
It's like a Tyrannosaurus Hulk, basically.
It really does
That's
look
pretty
like
much
a
the
Tyrannosaurus
Lizard's
Hulk.
design too. Like, he's just like a scientist with purple pants.
Yep, and he's got that lab coat on that he was wearing
Yeah.
when things went wrong, but he doesn't want to take it off because it's commemorative.
So like Green Goblin, I love him. I think he's a wonderful character, but I'm also like pretty much sick of seeing him in movie form.
I totally agree.
And if they're gonna bring him out in a new Marvel movie or in the MCU, I hope they wait a bit. I hope they kind of hold off. We don't even know what the future of Spider-Man is like in the MCU. If he's gonna get like yanked back over to Sony and they're just gonna take things from there, or if he's gonna stick around.
I think like the Sam Raimi stuff handled him well, but I don't want to see like the cackling, maniacal, Halloween chucking psychopath again in the MCU. Like, maybe take a few years, build up everybody else. He's cool. He's low on my list right now.
He kind of lives right in the middle of the sort of Spider-Man villain spectrum, where he's scary because he's like a guy that Peter knows in real life. He's Norman Osborn, and he's like, he kind of ruins him on a personal level, but at the same time, he does put on a Halloween mask and use like pumpkins? He uses pumpkins as a weapon. It's strange. And then I hated that in like the Sam Raimi movies, they were like, yes, these are tactical military pumpkins. Like this is like a hoverboard that he made for the military. It's like that's not a thing
which you can kind of see like the way they took Vulture versus the way they took that. I don't think there's like a balanced way to make a viable pumpkin bomb that doesn't come off as stupid.
I think the best way they've done Green Goblin in the comics. I actually really like Ultimate Green Goblin, and I'm sure people are gonna get mad at me for that because a lot of people like his kind of classical interpretation. But as far as making him like a believable thing that you could possibly do in a live-action movie, I mean, having him basically do super steroids and trying to like copy the Spider-Man serum and then screwing it up and going mad with power and having natural fire abilities. That's one way. And there's the Beetle. I don't know how you put him in movies. I feel like maybe he's one of those dudes who like gets like a weird low-key mention in one of the 7 Spider-Man movies we've gotten so far or whatever, but I forget if he's shown up in there. Then there's the Prowler. I have no idea what his story is. I really should know the Prowler, but I don't know. I kind of love when they take these goofy, like old school, like old Stan Lee characters, and they're just like, how do we make them remotely compelling? What do you do with that? What's an interesting story here, and maybe we'll get more of those.
Yeah, I mean, we've also seen in the last few years, we saw the Rhino, we saw Electro. They've been tackled before. I think there's ways to bring those guys back. Sandman, obviously. I'm trying to think who else. And obviously Venom and Carnage. I don't know if they'll weave in eventually, but yeah, there's a really cool like rogues gallery here of really interesting, really weird, really insane creatures, people.
Here's Lasher. He's one of the many sort of symbiote characters if you can't tell by looking at him.
I lost track.
He's a very clear one. Yeah,
I
think Venom's really cool. I like him when they get him right, but I feel like once you get kind of off in his corner, it just becomes like you're like, well, go back to Spider-Man, Again, it's the sort of Joker Batman problem where it's like here's a cool villain, but they exist sort of on the crux of being attached to the hero.
I could see us seeing Doc Ock again.
I definitely want to see Doc Ock again. Everyone's speculating that he's going to show up in the new Spider-Man video game. Basically, they're kind of setting up this new Sinister Six, which has had like a million iterations already.
In the game, you mean?
In the game, yeah. And then we saw that E3 reveal with a huge boss fight, and had all the dudes jumping around, and like, they all get together and start kicking him with Mr. Negative. And I think some voice actor leaked that I think he did leak that Doc Ock is in there.
Yeah.
Or the Rhino or something.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, I don't know, these characters are all suited very well to boss fights, so
totally,
it'll be fun to see that.
Yeah, there was also that rumor kicking around about the Sinister Six movie.
That sounds like such a terrible idea. That's what Amazing Spider-Man 2 was trying to set up.
Right.
Like they were just like, yes, the movie about that was going to be like sort of a Spider-Man Suicide Squad almost.
Yeah, we'll see how the dots connect with Sony Pictures and Marvel and everything else. But in the meantime, as like an old school Spider-Man fan, and I know you are a big one too, Max. This is really cool. This is a good time to be a fan. Like we're getting an awesome new game. We had a really good new movie. Spider-Man's folded into the MCU perfectly, and they can only go to Venom from here.
Let's see how Venom does it. I mean, I want to see, like, apparently the Venom trailer performed better than any of the previous Spider-Man trailers. So people are like either really curious or really stoked on that. I don't know if that actually.
You know what? I think there's a ton of curiosity around handling that character well on film because we've only seen it once, and it was Tobey Maguire, or what's his name?
Topher Grace.
Topher Grace.
Yeah.
And that was just, I will never understand that casting. That will always be a question mark.
They were trying to do an anti-Peter Parker, but a better Peter Parker than the Peter Parker they had as Peter Parker.
Right.
So that didn't make any sense.
Yeah. Either way, it's good to see Spider-Man is swinging back into our hearts.
Yeah. Now, speaking of really, I guess, insect or arachnid-themed superheroes, it's time for some Ant-Man stuff.
All right.
Yeah, time to put on these masks.
What do these do?
Hasbro sent us Ant-Man toys to play with.
Ow.
And they make you.
God, that hurts.
They kind of hurt your nose. They're weird. We actually had to take parts of them. We had to take parts of them off because they're meant for children.
They're made for a child's head.
They're made for children, and they're pretty much just. They've done these with other characters, and sometimes they have cool voices. Ant-Man doesn't really have a cool voice. He just sounds like Paul Rudd.
Hey, it's me, Paul Rudd.
Hey, I love you, man. Starring me and my friend Jason Segel. But this has this whole like ant vision thing in one of the eyes. See, look at that.
Yep.
It's like being at the optometrist.
See, it works for us better. Like, it makes you guys look like there's a lot of you. But
yeah, we do look really cool, though.
Yeah, check out how cool we look.
Awesome.
Hey, let's pose for the thumbnail.
So, I don't know. Yeah, hey, look at us. Look at us go. Anyway, so...
It's stuck on my head, and now I have to live like this forever.
Actually, it hurts my nose, and I'm fogging up. But then again, this is made for small children. I wanted to talk a bit
about... You have
to
fight us for it.
About Ant-Man toys and how you make them and how you pull them off. Obviously, this is a character who can shrink down and become very small. And they've made some, kind of obvious stuff like Marvel Legends figures where they're just the characters. But of course, there's no little tiny Ant-Man. You can't have like a little microscopic one. You have to use like a piece of dust and pretend that that's him.
It's true.
They did do a Build-A-Figure for the first Ant-Man movie where if you got all the pieces together, you'd have big Ant-Man. I think that was probably for Civil War, actually. But anyway, they're also making these more toyetic toys, which do fun features things. So like, here's the Wasp, and she goes, "Wha-cha."
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, like she'll fly around.
Everybody loves when the Wasp does that.
Wha-cha. And
She does like kegels. Look at those.
that's really
look at that leg.
That's really it.
That's
Are you
crazy
allowed to
talk.
say kegels on this show? I don't know.
I don't know, man.
But that's all. Like her head moves, and then she goes like that.
This is like a piece of plastic in the middle of the mask that really just pushes right into your face.
It's actually really nice if you have like a sinus problem. It's kind of like it's like those nose breathing strips for if you snore.
I think my nose
might
is too
sleep with
large
this on.
for this to have this on for this long. This is gonna be bad. I'm gonna have a big red bolt.
I think you look very cool.
You look great too.
Now, you just had a kid, right?
Yeah, I've done some unboxing videos at home myself. It's called The Diaper.
Ew, that's gross. No, I'm not very familiar with how childbirth works, but this Ant-Man toy seems like a pretty good representation of it.
Yeah, we could teach you about childbirth at home right now with this Ant-Man toy.
Would you say that childbirth is sort of along these lines?
Yeah.
That's pretty much it. It's just a small person comes out of a larger person.
Yeah, by having the entire front of their body fold open while they stand there without changing a single facial expression.
This toy cracks me up. This is one of the new Ant-Man figures, and it's the whole thing is that you know how Ant-Man is small? Get it?
Does he do that in the movie? I haven't seen that film yet.
No.
Does his own self come out tiny from his body?
I don't think he does it. I'm gonna take this off because I can't breathe. But
Is that like a front poop?
that's like a ooh.
Oh man, it got steamy in there.
It really does get fogged up. You should get some of those lens wipes.
Yeah,
Pretty fun though.
We should not wear these
We
anymore.
should hang on to these and wear them to parties.
God, it really hurt in the face.
They also have
Got my right in the.
his quantum ship, which is even more confusing for it to shoot out of his chest.
I don't think you can say that on this show either.
Quantum ship. I could say that.
All right.
Who could tell us what we can and can't say? No one knows.
I mean, probably the people that run the company.
That's true.
Yeah.
But yeah, here, look at that.
That's good. So okay, that's
really loud.
that's a lot.
Yeah. So I don't know. I guess the problem with Ant-Man toys is you can't make a toy that shrinks too easily. You can make a smaller one, but what are you gonna do with it? You're gonna have it shoot out of his chest?
Yep.
Have a seat, Ant-Man.
We also have this Ant-Man, which is a smaller Ant-Man, regular size Ant-Man. He comes with a small Paul Rudd head that I forgot to bring in here. I don't like saying Rudd head.
There we go. I think this is here. Somebody tell me. Does that happen in the film? I don't. And then the Wasps comes. It's hard to say that name a lot. The Wasps. Anyway, this concludes our segment on Ant-Man and the Wasp.
The title of this segment was supposed to be like the problem with Ant-Man toys, but what we learned today was the problem with us.
Let's put on these masks to hide our shame.
I don't know where mine is anymore.
I don't know. I have it over here. You can't have it back.
Look at the small one.
All right, coming up. So Jordan Vogt Roberts,
Hold on, I'm gonna put it right on your head.
You're gonna put it in there? You
Yeah,
put the little
make
man
it
in
look
there?
like
Let me do
that
that
Drake
again.
Views album cover.
All right. Do I look cool?
There you go. There, he's just in your hair.
Ooh, look at that.
I'm gonna see how many Ant-Man I can keep in your hair. Keep doing it.
Yeah, okay. Let me switch if I can see that I read the prompter
There you
for
go.
this
We got a
thing.
whole bunch of Ant-Man.
Okay. Yeah, so we
more.
have definitely not done this show for 5 weeks. I think we are a little bit out of practice.
Perfect.
Anyway, thank you for watching this week's Up at Noon. Here is my interview with Metal Gear video. Good Lord. Anyway, while you were off changing.
You fool! That's great.
Yeah.
It fell off your head.
All right, well, you were off changing diapers. I got to talk to the director of the upcoming, hopefully, Metal Gear movie with Jordan Vogt Roberts. He's a super cool guy. Loves video games, loves IGN for whatever reason. And here's what he thinks about making video game movies work. Let's take a look. Hey everybody, Max here for IGN. I'm with Jordan Vogt Roberts. You may know him as the director of Kong Skull Island, which is a video gamey movie. You also worked on You're the Worst, which had a cameo from Borderlands in like the first episode. And you've been champing at the bit to make the Metal Gear movie.
Also correct.
Is that happening? Are you doing that?
We just turned in the script, and I think it's one of the best scripts I've ever read. It's one of the coolest, weirdest, most Kojima things. me and being involved in it, I look at it as someone who was like, I would make the hell out of this movie, but if I wasn't involved in it, I would still look at that script and be like, holy shit.
Okay, so that's something I want to talk to you about, because we've seen a lot of video game movies over the years, and a lot of them really aren't great. There have been a lot of very, very bad ones, and there really haven't been any great ones. And I think part of the problem is that we've got video games are kind of they're a new medium, you know? Like you're in your 30s, you're a fairly young director, and it seems like you're one of the first directors out there who's really vocal and a fan of games, but also of movies. Can you talk a little bit about sort of what's the difference between the mediums, and what's the problem with making movies based on games?
Oh boy. Well, first of all, I do think that there basically have been good video game movies. They just weren't based on video games. I think both Snowpiercer and Edge of Tomorrow, essentially in my mind, function. Those are almost like perfect adaptations of video games that don't exist.
Yeah, Edge of Tomorrow is kind of a roguelike.
Yeah, but Edge of Tomorrow, even like just the mechanic of it is so embedded in the idea of how video games work, like respawning and continuing, and then Snowpiercer, just the left to right progression, like through a stage and then going into new levels like that. To me, those are video game movies. They just happen to be not based on video games. But for me, the bigger thing that you're talking about, and I've said this in a lot of interviews, so people are probably like, we get it, like stop talking about the same thing, but there's a huge difference between an active experience and a passive experience, and they make you feel different things in different ways, and I think that most people have tried to adapt games by simply adapting plot mechanics and story, as opposed to sort of trying to tap into what you felt when you played that game. What did you feel the first time you play it? And then how do you translate that feeling cinematically?
Right. Which is like kind of the problem with the Uncharted movie, which has sort of been in development hell for 9 years or something, because Uncharted is so firmly rooted in Indiana Jones, which has been around before. Like we sort of have that.
Yeah, sure. But there's also, Uncharted does make you, it's more than just an Indiana Jones sort of knockoff. Like there are very specific things about the gameplay of Uncharted that you only feel in those games. Like the way those levels unfold, like it's these evolving set pieces, right? And in a weird way, most video game action has actually influenced film in a really weird way, where I think most bad action movies have sort of video game action where it just unfolds, and it's, to me, it always goes back to Phantom Menace. They're in a submarine, and a giant fish comes and grabs their thing, and then a bigger fish comes and grabs that thing.
There's always a bigger fish.
And then I'm pretty sure, yeah, we're gonna need a bigger boat. I'm pretty sure a bigger fish then grabs that thing. And it's action happening around the people. It's not John McClane running over, like choosing to run over glass, or Indiana Jones choosing to shoot a guy in the middle of the street fight. Those are moments that reflect character. There's a lot of action scenes in movies right now that are video game action in a bad way, where it's just cool things happening around the people without them making meaningful decisions that inform you of who these characters are and what they think. And so for me, a big part of like the press tour on Kong was actually trying to be like, I want to rewrite the narrative on this, where I would be in interviews talking to people, and I'd be like, they'd say, well, what were your big influences? And I'd go, video games. And then the PR people would pull me aside later and say, don't mention video games. And I was like, why? That's stupid. Like, they're like, yeah, but there's this association with video games and movies as a negative thing. And to me, you ask about like being a filmmaker that grew up on it, those are my influences. That's the stuff that shaped me. Like, and I'm part of this first wave of directors who like grew up on it.
Yeah.
Like my reference points are the same as if it was a movie or a book. It's just, that's a medium that I always grew up with.
Well, I mean, I think the one thing that Kong does really well is it's got this feeling of like boss fights. Like it's this reveal of like a new giant thing that's coming, you know, that's showing up, and there's that kind of that reveal and that pageantry, and it's different from like, I don't know, it's different from like a more conventional sort of monster reveal. But there's that kind of that boss fighty feeling in movies, and we've got this going back to like the guy with the AUG in Die Hard. Mm-hmm. You know, he's like, oh, he's not just a regular bad guy, he's like a tougher bad guy. How do you encapsulate that kind of like, how do you take that sort of thing you experience as a player in a game and sort of inject that into a passive story?
I mean, for me, a big part of Kong was also going back to Harryhausen. You know, where you go and you sort of encounter these new creatures, and that in itself almost has like a boss-like effect. But when you go back to the original Kong, when you go back to Willis O'Brien, like the way those creatures were revealed, honestly, it's not that dissimilar. But I think that it's just about giving weight to the characters. But in Kong in particular, it was really important to me that generally you only experienced those things from the point of view of our protagonists. So every time you're being led there, you're not cutting to some random POV. You only really cut to Kong by himself when characters aren't watching him once. So you're always sort of being thrust into that through active protagonists in the film. So it's sort of like a POV thing.
Okay. Now, they've made a lot of video game movies.
I don't know if that makes sense, but okay.
No, I see what you're saying. I think it's funny because like the sort of the narrative choices made in games. I think one thing games have a problem with is passage of time. Like that's something that movies have down pat, whereas like the sort of the point of view is something that fits in more in games when you're actually controlling it. But no, I was gonna ask you what's your favorite video game movie that exists already?
I mean, honestly, it is like. It would be Edge of Tomorrow or Snowpiercer.
What about one that's based on an existing video game?
The closest thing.
I realize that's a mean question because there's no right answer.
I actually think there's really cool stuff in the Silent Hill movie. I don't think it fully congeals, and there's a lot. It's really backloaded, and there's a lot of stuff that didn't quite translate. But I actually really like that director. Like Brotherhood of the Wolf is a movie that no one talks about.
Dude,
enough,
that's a Bloodborne movie.
Yeah, that movie is incredible, and no one. There's a. Someone the other day, I stopped being their friend, I swear to God, because we were talking about Brotherhood of the Wolf, and they said to me, "Oh, I really liked that movie until someone had a sword that became a whip that was made out of bones," and I was like, "You're an idiot. That's the coolest thing on the planet."
No,
like for me, like playing like Ivy and Soul Calibur and shit, like, oh yeah, whip sword, of course, and you see that in Brotherhood of the Wolf, and you're like. So I stopped being that person's friend.
I think that's a good decision.
Life.
Brotherhood of the Wolf is fun as hell. They're doing like Native American karate in like Victorian France or something and fighting a.
And you want to know something really sad is, go on your computer right now, try and find a legal way to instantly watch Brotherhood of the Wolf.
I had to. I'm not joking. I bought this a couple months ago. I had to go on Amazon and buy a used DVD. It doesn't exist on Blu-ray unless you get the German version or something.
You truly can't go to iTunes, Netflix. There's not a way to stream that film.
I know.
It's so sad.
I tried. It was like a journey for me.
Watch Brotherhood of the Wolf if you haven't seen it. It's incredible.
Yeah, go watch. I'm actually really happy you brought that up. I wanted to talk about that for ages. Anyway,
this is just a PSA about how good Brotherhood of the Wolf is. Check it out.
Brotherhood of the Wolf, the best video game movie that you can't legally watch online anywhere. There's the headline for this video.
BitTorrents don't exist.
Well, Jordan, I love hearing your perspectives on games and movies, and I'm dying to see your Metal Gear movie when it someday comes out, I hope.
If and when. It's one of the coolest scripts I've ever read.
Sweet.
It's awesome. But I mean, like I was talking to Hideo about this the other day, because he thinks it's funny that I grew up on his stuff and like idolize him, and so. But how did he put it? We were doing a talk together in Tokyo about my first movie, because Kings of Summer never had a proper release in Japan, so it just had a proper release, and Kojima-san wrote the liner notes for the DVD. So for me, that's like one of the most surreal things possible. So I'm sitting there in a store with Kojima-san promoting my first movie that was never released in Japan. And he was just talking about how, and he put it so succinctly, he basically was just like, there will be a time in which it ceases to be weird that filmmakers are influenced by video games. For me, this is just something I've always had, like it rewired my brain at a young age. And you think about how different our upbringing was and how sort of video games were still kind of this niche, obscure thing versus kids now, right?
Yeah, they're everywhere.
I think more so, if you asked a bunch of random kids, do you watch movies or do you play video games? I bet you more kids would say, yeah, I play games. Like movies now are like for cinephiles only. It's a weird thing.
I mean, I think there's an interesting parallel with comic books, and like it took us a long time to get to the point where there are like good comic book movies, and we're finally kind of there.
Right.
And now kids are growing up with games, so it's like a different animal.
Right. Well, but it's about understanding, I think, the language of it. Like to me, it always goes back to like what logically would compel you to say, I'm in a room, I should push this box in a corner and it's gonna unlock something in like a Zelda way, or I'm gonna shoot this eye with an arrow. There's no real world logic that relates to that. there's weird like Hyrule logic.
Sure, yeah.
But you truly like each game has its own language, right? Like Metroid and whatever you want to play, Final Fantasy, they each have their own internal like logic systems that if you don't understand, you're like, well, what is this? And I think that there is a wave of filmmakers coming right now who grew up on that, understand that logic, and understand how to hopefully translate what those things made us feel when we were young. Like, you know, when I was young and you play Super Metroid for the first time, even on the SNES, like the weird feeling of being isolated, alone on a foreign planet, like it hits you. I learned altruism, the concept of it, from the end of Super Metroid. Like when the baby saves you, that like taught me a life lesson, you know. And I just think that there's a wave of filmmakers that are gonna come up that had those same experiences. And for some reason, I'm just, I guess, one of the first.
Well, maybe after Metal Gear, do like a Metroid movie. I'd be down to see that.
I have a pitch for a Metroid movie that they'll never let me do. It's too crazy.
Can we hear it? The last Metroid is in captivity. The galaxy is at peace.
It legitimately would be her alone. Like it would be a little bit of her talking to herself, but like as soon as they introduce other talking characters in those games, to me it loses everything. You put her alone, and it's like it's almost got a little bit more to do with like the silence of a movie like Drive, like the quietness, and having it be like a real intense mood piece, but mixed with sci-fi.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, so much of Metroid is the last act of Alien. You know, it's
the best.
corridors.
It's the best.
Anyway,
hey, Nintendo, why can't I play Metroid Prime on my Switch?
Look into it, Nintendo.
Yeah, Nintendo, who's watching this? I know clearly you're watching this. Why can't I play it? And when you do allow it, bring back the lock-on mechanic so I don't have to aim like a first-person shooter. It's a first-person adventure, and I want to play it that way.
Thanks, Jordan. For everything else, whatever this just was, keep it locked on IGN.
And we're back, and that's Up at Noon for you this week. Thank you so much to Jordan Vogt Roberts for coming onto the show and debunking that classic mystery about that GameCube controller that Fran, our boss, made with clay back in the weird old days where he was allowed to do things like that.
Yeah.
Which paved the ways for idiots like us to put the Ant-Man on our heads and hurt our faces with masks. That was Up at Noon. Thank you so much for watching. We are taking a 2-week break after this because of Comic-Con and this boy's marriage. So be sure to congratulate him for one or both of those things. And we will see you
Tune in for Comic-Con.
Yeah.
Watch our
Tune in for
coverage.
Comic-Con.
It's
Watch
gonna
all
be
that.
very busy, a lot of craziness, a lot of fun times, and hopefully it goes more smoothly than this episode of Up at Noon.
Well, they won't let you do any of this stuff with this like that.
I'm gonna bring this, and if I get nervous on the camera, I'm just gonna put this on and be like, all right,
I don't think you're gonna get
tell
that.
me about your new project.
You're not gonna get that through the TSA.
I think you can. There's no metal in it.
Why don't you bring some whipped cream in the Barbasol, see if you can eat it?
You know what I found out? You can bring any liquid you want through the TSA if you freeze it into a solid block.
Actually, you can bring anything you want through the TSA if you drink it first. It's a blink.
That's
For those of you guys watching on your phones.
That's probably true.
Have a good night, and we'll see you next in 2 weeks, 3 weeks. Goodbye. It's just loud. It's a loud clicking noise.
Good night.
Well, it's like the middle of the day. Well, the lights are out. I guess we gotta go to sleep now. That really hurt my face, that mask. Who did they make that for? A guy
Children.
with no facial features?
Children, they're smaller people. They're smaller versions of you or me. They're
No,
really
I think
little tiny people.
I had a big, large nose when I was a child. So
Why don't you go find a child who's the same dimensions as you when you were a boy, and you can put this on his face.
You know what? I'm not going to actually do that hunt for the child of the same dimensions as me.
Do you have accurate measurements of how big you were as a boy?
You know who else likes going to different dimensions? Ant-Man.